My son's next wife is this girl. Erin, my mother-in-law, announced smugly, pointing to a young woman beside her. I blinked in shock. Next wife? Excuse me, what do you mean? I uttered, baffled and confused. Erin's smirk only deepened. Oh, Amanda, don't act surprised. I'm saying we don't need you anymore, she sneered. I turned to my husband, praying he'd defend me, but he looked down, silent. They had no idea how their stunt would eventually backfire on them. My name is Amanda, and I am a 35-year-old office worker. I have a husband named Dawson. I met my husband at work. He was 6 years younger than me, so I thought I was naturally excluded from his romantic interest. I love you, Amanda. I don't care about age or anything like that. I love women who are older than me. He appealed to me aggressively every day. Dawson's passionate feelings for me won me over, and I decided to go out with him. From then on, our relationship went strong, and we eventually got married. However, there were many events that watered down our marriage. We immediately went to his parents' house so I could meet them. At that time, my mother-in-law opposed our marriage because I was older than my husband. You're 33 years old, she pointed out. You should already be married and have a child who's a kindergartner or elementary schooler by now. So why the delay? Is there something wrong with you? What are you talking about, Mom? Dawson interjected. It's your first time meeting her and you're being rude. What? But this is important, she insisted. You are the eldest son, so you have to choose your partner carefully. My mother-in-law started to talk about me being in my 30s, being single for a long time, and other things that I was concerned about. Then my father-in-law stepped in. Hey, Dawson is the one who chose her, so we have no right to tell him what to do, he scolded my mother-in-law. Amanda, I'm sorry, my wife was rude, he said to me. My mother-in-law became quiet. Thus, my husband and I were given permission to marry, and we finally did. However, although my mother-in-law allowed us to marry, she did not approve of me. My husband's parents were a somewhat wealthy family with strong roots in the local community, and my mother-in-law was very proud of that. My husband grew up in such a family and was pampered. Even so, he wasn't selfish. In fact, I even thought he was cute in his calm and naive nature. However, there were many problems during our engagement. My mother-in-law suddenly called me over and introduced me to women in the community, presenting them as her family's wives. Since they have deep roots in the local community, my mother-in-law is the representative of the local women's association and seems to be a leader in the community. I followed her lead and greeted the local women, each of whom welcomed me warmly and softly wished me luck. They were probably talking about my relationship with my mother-in-law. Apparently, the people in the women's group have a hard time connecting with her too. I was a little relieved to know that I had allies on my side. My mother-in-law told me to find out if you can get pregnant, and forced me to get a fertility test before marriage. I was a little peeved at her, but considering my age, it could be a risky childbirth. To be honest, I wondered if my body could conceive, so I decided to get the test. When I went to the gynecologist for a checkup, the doctor assured me that I would be fine. I thought I could get married with peace of mind now, so I gave my mother-in-law an enthusiastic report, but she simply replied, "Oh, I see," with a cold, deadpan expression on her face. You were the one who told me to check it out, I thought, nearly getting angry but holding back. Perhaps she had expected I wouldn't be able to give birth. Did she think that if I couldn't have a child, she could oppose the marriage? As I felt uneasy, the day before the wedding, I received a message from my mother-in-law. Come to our house for a dinner party. Dawson and I were asked to come over to his parents' house, which felt unusual so close to the wedding. Despite my reservations, I went along with him as his parents insisted. We had dinner with my in-laws, and when we finished eating dessert, my mother-in-law said, "So about moving in together?" My eyes went wide. I was thinking, what nonsense are you talking about? We are supposed to start our new life with just the two of us. When I heard she wanted to move in with us, I began to panic. We don't mind if it's right after the wedding, she added. Apparently, in my mother-in-law's mind, she is set on moving in with me and Dawson. No, this has to be a joke. I would never let anything get in the way of our newlywed life. I hurriedly interrupted her. Wait a minute, Erin. What are you talking about? Living together? It's still a long way off, isn't it? We're not comfortable with you talking about it right before we get married, I retorted. She looked at me with a mean face, as if I was the one saying something funny. Oh, Dawson, you haven't told her yet, she asked. What? I half panicked and looked at him quickly. He didn't change his expression. Oh, I think I forgot, he began. What? What do you mean? I asked confusedly. Well, my mom and I have been talking about it for a while. We're going to live together in this house when we get married, Dawson concluded. But this is the first time I'm hearing this. Such an important decision should have been made earlier, and you should have talked to me about it, I added indignantly. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. Please accept it, Amanda, he continued. In hindsight, I wish I had refrained from getting married at that point in the evening, but this was 2 years ago when I had just turned 33. I felt I would have no future if I abandoned this relationship, and it might be difficult to find a new one and get married in the future. Perhaps I was impatient, but I had made the wrong life choice. Maybe my head was in the clouds, because I was finally able to get married after he proposed to me. Contrary to my hopes, I had to move in with my in-laws upon marriage. As I expected, married life was much worse than I had imagined. First of all, we were not living in a family home. We were 4 adults living together in a single-family house. There was really no privacy. There was none of the sweet honeymoon life I had imagined in my mind, and my mother-in-law was always picking on me about everything. Amanda, you have a really plain face, she would say. Dawson is so cute and pretty, with a strong nose and eyes. But what if your baby looks ugly like you? That wouldn't be good. You're also a terrible cook and housekeeper. You've got nothing to offer. I've never seen that before. What a pity. She always said these rude remarks to me, and she even told me to find out if I could have children while we were engaged. So she was pressing me to have kids. I feel like my mentality is being drained every time she talks to me. How old are you now? Do you even know how old you are? She would ask. Usually, at your age, you must have had a child. I don't want a wife in my house who can't have children. You better have a boy. I was surprised that people still say such things in this day and age, but I thought, well, my in-laws are an old family, and old-fashioned traditions are still alive and well. She started complaining about my job. Why don't you quit? She demanded. But I love my work. It's my passion and purpose. Since moving in with my in-laws, they've given me permission to keep driving to my job, and quitting would only disrupt things for everyone. I never want to stop working, so I brushed off my mother-in-law's comments without letting them get to me. My mother-in-law, who was angry because things were not going her way, demanded that I give her $400 a month if I would not quit my job. In other words, she wanted me to put in money for living expenses. My mother-in-law, of course, was lenient with my husband, so she didn't demand any rent or living expenses from him. But I guess she was angry because things weren't going her way, so she demanded money from me personally. Since I had been allowed to live in the house for free, I decided to put in $400 a month to my parents-in-law's house, thinking that was good enough for me. You have an office job. You won't be able to have leisure time if you give so much of your money to me, my mother-in-law said, with a mean smile on her face. To begin with, I'm not the type to spend much money. I use things until I can't use them anymore, so my life is pretty simple. I'm sure my mother-in-law is under the mistaken impression that I have no money and live a poor life. For me, it wasn't particularly hard to give her $400. If anything, my mother-in-law's different harassment each time was more painful. 2 years passed before I realized I was living like this. As expected, at the age of 35, not only my mother-in-law but even my husband began to ask me, "Why haven't we had a baby yet?" He began to blame me. I was taken aback because I did not expect my husband to say such a thing. Around this time, my husband also joined my mother-in-law in picking on me. We were supposed to love each other, but in 2 years, my husband had come to echo my mother-in-law's words. It seems that little by little, she had influenced his thinking. If it had been just my mother-in-law, I might have been able to handle it. I believed I had a good marriage with my husband, so his betrayal was deeply painful. Then together, my husband and mother-in-law took an even more shocking and unexpected step. One day something happened when I came home after a long day of work. When I went to the living room, I found my parents-in-law, my husband, and a strange woman chatting with them. She looked younger than my husband and was in her mid-20s. "Do we have a guest over?" I asked, wondering who it was. My mother-in-law looked at me and said, "Amanda, sit right here." I sat down and my mother-in-law suddenly said something outrageous. "I've decided that Dawson's next wife will be this girl." Huh? I had no idea what she meant. "What do you mean, his next wife? What do you mean?" I asked, confused. My mother-in-law made a disgusted and annoyed face at me. "You're so stupid. I'm saying I don't need you anymore. Your time is up," she continued. "What do you mean my time is up?" I asked, horrified. "Because it's no use expecting a child from an old woman like you. That's why we need a young girl to be Dawson's new wife. She's 22 years old now, and she's the niece of one of my neighbors in the Women's Association. She has a much prettier face than yours, and I'm sure she'll give birth to a healthy, cute little boy," my mother-in-law concluded. How could she? I was so stunned. My husband and I were still legally married, and to bring a new wife into the family is just insane. My husband should be objecting to this. At least that's what I had hoped. I was naive to think so. My husband said, "That's the way it is. Please fill this out as soon as possible," and handed me the divorce papers. I was beyond shocked and quite taken aback. Is it that important to have a child? My life is over if I stay with these insane people, I thought. Incidentally, my father-in-law, who had warned my mother-in-law before we got married, has been completely useless since then, and has not tried to get involved in any of the hassles that have occurred since we got married. "Okay, I got it. I just need to fill it out, right?" I said, defeated, and filled out the divorce papers. My mother-in-law and husband were overjoyed to see me fill it out. I told them there would be no division of property. "Of course not. I won't let you take Dawson's money," my mother-in-law said smugly. "That's right. I've taken care of you all this time. I don't have any money to give you," my husband added. What a misunderstanding these two have. Yes, I hope they remain unaware of it. Congratulations to them. Thus, my husband and I divorced easily. I hurriedly packed my belongings and went back to my parents' house. My parents were very surprised. When I explained what had happened, they understood and were even angry. My parents approved of my decision to leave. They were a little angry that I hadn't talked to them earlier if that was the case. After apologizing to my parents, I rushed to find an apartment for myself. I planned to live near my office, so I was actively searching for a suitable place. There are a lot of good properties, and it's hard to make a decision. In the blink of an eye, a month has passed since I divorced my husband. Then I heard that my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law suddenly came to my parents' house. My parents asked me to come over to their house. When I arrived, my ex-husband was there and immediately said, "Amanda, what's going on? Why are you bringing this up all of a sudden?" Confused, I replied, "I have no idea what you're talking about." He held up his phone, showing me something on the screen. "We're talking about this," he said. It was an article about me. The message on the screen had the name of a Michelin star restaurant, and the word owner next to my name. "How can you be the owner of a fancy restaurant?" he asked, bewildered. "You're just an office worker, aren't you?" "Oh, you saw the broadcast the other day," I said calmly. "I'm gaining experience in office work for when I have another business venture in the future. As for the restaurant, I inherited it from my great-grandfather's family, and I've been the owner in place of my father for about 5 years now. I graduated from a night culinary school after college, and I have a chef's license. I worked as a chef at my father's restaurant on nights and weekends while working as an office worker. I'm currently preparing for another business venture, so the restaurant is mostly left to the manager. But a news channel wanted to interview the owner, so I just appeared on the show," I calmly explained. My ex-mother-in-law and ex-husband looked at each other in shock, clearly surprised by my story. Well, I don't blame them. When I mentioned that my father ran a restaurant upon meeting Dawson's parents, my mother-in-law assumed it was just a small place. "Oh, I see," was all she could manage to say, looking visibly embarrassed. My ex-husband suddenly looked excited. "Wait, that's just great. I didn't realize you were making so much money. That's good," he exclaimed. "Huh?" I uttered, perplexed. "I'm calling off the divorce. Come back home now," Dawson added. I stared at him, incredulous. What is wrong with you? I asked, feeling a mixture of disbelief and anger. From what my ex-husband started telling me, his new young girlfriend doesn't work, doesn't do any housework, and just lazes around at home. She even calls my mom Grandma and says, "Grandma, you're being annoying." She also calls me old geezer and says I have to pay cash for her to have children. She says, "If you don't pay me, I won't do it." She even threatened to call the police, saying we forced her to have kids, Dawson said. My curiosity piqued. I asked, "And what else?" He sighed and continued, "She's been unemployed ever since she graduated from high school, and her parents couldn't do anything about it. So, the Women's Association, hearing that my family was looking for a new wife to get rid of their daughter-in-law, introduced her to us just to push their troublesome niece out of their lives," my ex-husband explained. I couldn't help but laugh. "So that's the kind of woman you wanted? The one your family thought was better than me?" I shook my head in amusement. My ex-mother-in-law, now looking miserable, said, "Well, yes, but I didn't know. It seems the Women's Association has been laughing behind my back all along. I'm so humiliated. People are looking at me with contempt now, and it's so embarrassing," she added quietly, and then continued, "Please, Amanda, come back as soon as possible and pretend that everything up until now was a misunderstanding and that nothing happened. Explain to the Women's Association too, and ask them to restore my reputation," my mother-in-law pleaded. Dawson added with desperation, "And my wife. She's spending all my salary however she likes, and I'm always short of money. She doesn't get up in the morning, doesn't do her chores, and of course she doesn't make lunch for me. I have to get by without lunch every day. Even my dad, who barely had any presents, has abandoned us both and left. He's gone." I laughed internally, knowing how in character this was for my ex-father-in-law. My ex-husband then looked at me, pleading, "We're in a lot of trouble. Please come back." I smiled at him and finally I said, "You deserved everything you got, didn't you? You kicked me out and brought her here. Now you're on your own. If you keep making a fuss about this, I'll call the police. Now get out," I added angrily. They stood there stunned, then nodded off and left my parents' house. I don't know what happened to them afterward, but a friend from the Women's Association, who had stayed in touch with my ex-husband, later told me that their family finances were so tight that even my ex-mother-in-law had to work part-time. And as usual, the new wife was still an unemployed money grubber who did nothing. My ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law were completely exhausted. I was pleased to hear this. Now, I am enjoying a pleasant single life. After experiencing this newfound freedom, I don't think I'll be able to consider marriage for a while. Still, I'd like to fall in love again, so I'll focus on my work for now while casually dating on the side.